Some monuments have stood for thousands of years against nature's fury. How did early engineers design these structures to endure environmental change? And what can their forgotten wisdom teach us today? We will uncover the precise principles that allowed ancient builders to create wonders capable of surviving earthquakes, floods, and relentless weather. How did they build foundations that dance with the earth instead of fighting it? And what secret materials did they use to make stone last for millennia? This journey reveals the ingenious foresight that defied time itself. Do you believe our modern world has lost this art of building for eternity? In the ancient city of Mohenjo-daro, streets were laid out with a purpose that went beyond simple order. They were designed with a sophisticated network of drains and channels, all anticipating the relentless seasonal monsoons. This was not just city planning, it was a profound understanding of the environment. The engineers did not see the heavy rains as a problem to be defeated, but as a pattern to be accommodated. They became meticulous students of their world, spending years, perhaps generations, observing how water flowed across the land, where the winds were strongest, and how the ground shifted. Their blueprints were born from this deep, patient observation. Every structure, from the grandest bath to the simplest home, became a direct response to its specific locale. It was a continuous dialogue between human ambition and the immutable forces of nature. This foundational principle, this foresight, is what separated a settlement that would vanish from one that would endure for millennia. By first learning the language of their environment, these pioneers laid the literal groundwork for durability. Their success hinged not on fighting nature, but on collaborating with it, a philosophy that naturally guided their next critical decision, the very substances they used to build their legacy. The very stones these builders chose tell a story of profound local knowledge. In Egypt, the immense limestone blocks for the pyramids were quarried directly from the nearby Giza Plateau. This was not merely a matter of logistical ease. That specific local stone had spent eons acclimating to the desert's brutal rhythm, expanding under the scorching sun and contracting in the cool of night without cracking. The engineers were not just cutting rock, they were selecting a material that had already passed the ultimate endurance test, the test of time in that exact environment. This philosophy of local sourcing was a global constant. Roman architects, for instance, frequently turned to a volcanic stone called tuff. Quarried from the hills around Rome, tuff was surprisingly lightweight and offered excellent insulation, a perfect natural response to the region's climate. It was strong enough for monumental structures, yet porous enough to breathe with the environment. This principle of using what the land provided created a powerful synergy. Importing a foreign marble or granite might have seemed grander, but it risked introducing a material unaccustomed to local stresses, one that could fracture under unfamiliar temperature swings or moisture levels. So from the granites of ancient India to the sandstones of Petra, builders prioritized materials that had evolved alongside the very challenges they were meant to withstand. The structure and its site were in a constant, silent conversation, a dialogue written in local stone and timber. This deep material compatibility formed the physical bedrock of their longevity, but it was only the beginning. The true genius emerged in how they assembled these resilient pieces into a form that could actually move. The true strength of these structures was not just in the stone, but in the shape. Look at the skeleton of a Roman aqueduct, a chain of perfect arches stretching toward the horizon. Each arch is a masterpiece of geometric logic, channeling the immense weight of stone and water not just downward, but strategically outward and around its open center. This elegant form distributed loads so evenly that the entire structure could shrug off the burden of heavy snow or the subtle, terrifying tremors of an earthquake. These early builders possessed an intuitive, almost innate understanding of physics. They did not have complex computer models, but they had generations of observation. They saw that nature itself relies on certain stable forms, and they began to mimic them. The arch, the triangle, the curve, these were not just aesthetic choices, they were tools for survival. They used these shapes to redirect environmental pressures, to guide immense forces away from a building's most vulnerable points, and send them safely into the welcoming earth. This principle of geometric stability transformed a pile of heavy stones into a cohesive, resilient entity. A perfect example of this foresight can be seen thousands of miles away in the Parthenon of Athens. At first glance, its columns appear perfectly straight, but that is an illusion. Each column has a subtle, gentle swelling in its center, a feature called Entasis. This was not a decorative flourish, it was a brilliant structural solution. The curve counteracted the optical illusion that straight columns would appear to bend inward under the weight of the roof, and more importantly, it made the entire colonnade stronger, better able to handle the immense compressive stresses. The form was dictated entirely by its function, a marriage of beauty and brute strength. By calculating these invisible load paths and weaving self-bracing geometries into the very blueprint, ancient engineers created skeletons that could bear immense weight for centuries without deforming. This clever, unspoken mathematics gave their creations a dynamic strength, a flexibility within their rigid form, paving the way for their most brilliant innovation, designing structures that could actually dance with a trembling earth. Water was the great paradox for every ancient builder, a life-giving resource that could, in an instant, become a devastating force of erosion and collapse. Their solution was not to stop the water, but to guide it, to give it a predetermined path of least resistance away from their most vulnerable foundations. High in the Andes, the engineers of Machu Picchu faced a monumental challenge. They built a city of stone on a razor's edge between two mountain peaks, a location exposed to torrential seasonal rains. Instead of fighting the inevitable downpours, they designed an intricate, almost invisible network of mastery. Stone channels were carved with precise slopes, directing rainwater along a cascading course through the city's heart. This water was funneled through underground conduits, safely bypassing the agricultural terraces and temple foundations that would have been washed away by uncontrolled runoff. Every gutter and drain was an integral part of the city's original blueprint, a preemptive strike against the landslides that constantly threatened the steep terrain. This same hydraulic intelligence appeared across the ancient world, though its form was shaped by local needs. In the arid plains of Mesopotamia, the threat was not flooding rain, but the insidious creep of ground moisture that could undermine the massive mud brick ziggurats. Their engineers became masters of sealants, waterproofing their sacred structures with layers of baked brick and a natural tar called bitumen. This created a protective shell that repelled the very element that could turn their foundations to mud. Meanwhile, Roman architects perfected the art of balance. Their sprawling cities featured not only sophisticated sewers and aqueducts to remove water, but also vast underground cisterns to store it. They understood that managing water was a two-part equation, dealing with its destructive excess during storms and its critical absence during droughts. These systems were never afterthoughts. They were woven into the initial design, a testament to a holistic understanding of the environment. By anticipating the flow of water and designing structures that worked in concert with it, these builders ensured their creations remained dry, stable, and intact for centuries. This mastery over one of nature's most fluid elements prepared them for an even more unpredictable challenge, the solid ground itself beginning to shake. Perhaps the most brilliant response to nature's unpredictability was to design foundations that could move. While the earth beneath them remained solid, early engineers in active seismic zones understood it was not always still. They knew a rigid structure, one that tried to stand absolutely firm against a tremor, would be the first to fracture. Their solution was not more rigidity, but a calculated flexibility. In Japan, wooden pagodas were constructed with a kind of architectural genius that seems to defy logic. Their multi-tiered roofs are not nailed together into a single, stiff unit. Instead, they are connected by complex, loose joints that allow each level to sway independently, almost like a stack of hats gently rocking in opposite directions. At the very heart of the pagoda, a massive central pillar called a shinbashira often hangs freely, acting not as a rigid support beam, but as a giant suspended pendulum. When an earthquake strikes, this central pillar sways and counter-swings, absorbing the violent energy of the tremor and distributing it throughout the structure. The entire building dances with the quake, its components moving in a carefully choreographed dissipation of force rather than resisting it. This was a form of ancient base isolation, a concept we think of as modern. Other cultures developed this same principle using the very ground they built upon. Some foundations were laid upon carefully raked layers of sand and smooth stones. During a seismic event, these layers would allow the entire structure above to shift and slide slightly, a few precious inches that made the difference between a building that settled and one that shattered. But one of the most stunning examples of this flexible philosophy is found in the stonework of the Inca. Look closely at the walls of Machu Picchu or Sacsayhuaman. The stones are not uniform bricks, they are bizarre polygonal shapes, each one unique, with multiple interlocking sides that fit together like an immense three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. There is no mortar holding them together. The strength of the wall comes entirely from this complex geometry. When the ground shakes, these stones do not resist the movement as a single, monolithic slab would. They shift, they grind, they settle, and then they lock back into place. The energy of the earthquake is transformed into friction between the stones, dissipated across thousands of tiny contact points. The wall breathes with the mountain. This was not crude construction. It was a profound acceptance of a fundamental truth that the earth moves, and to survive, you must move with it. By designing their structures to dance with tremors instead of fighting them, these engineers turned a destructive force into a manageable rhythm. This mastery over the solid earth prepared them for a challenge that was just as powerful, but entirely invisible: the relentless and shaping force of the wind. Even the wind, an invisible and relentless sculptor, was a force to be understood, not ignored. High above the desert floor, the smooth, onion-shaped domes of the Taj Mahal present a perfect, seamless curve to the sky. This was not just a beautiful form, it was a brilliant aerodynamic solution. The architects knew that sharp corners and flat surfaces would catch the wind, creating pockets of high pressure that could slowly tear the structure apart. Instead, they designed these majestic domes so that high winds would glide effortlessly over their surfaces, flowing around the building like water around a stone in a river. This principle of reducing wind load was a global constant in tall construction. The builders of Gothic cathedrals reaching unprecedented heights faced the same challenge. Their response was to taper their spires and towers, creating slender, pointed profiles that sliced through the air, offering minimal resistance to powerful gusts. They were shaping stone to mimic the way nature itself deals with the wind, in the elegant sweep of a bird's wing or the sturdy taper of a mountain peak. This aerodynamic foresight was crucial for preventing structural fatigue, that slow, insidious weakening of materials caused by constant, rhythmic pushing and pulling. By letting the wind slip past, they ensured their towers would stand not for decades, but for centuries. In desert regions, this understanding of airflow was applied with even more practical ingenuity. Entire cities were oriented to align with the prevailing winds. This strategic placement served a dual purpose. It funneled breezes through streets and courtyards for natural cooling, a vital consideration in scorching climates, while also minimizing the accumulation of wind-driven sand that could bury doorways and erode foundations. They were not just building shelters, they were crafting entire environments that worked in harmony with the atmospheric currents. This meticulous attention to an invisible force reveals a level of planning that seems almost prescient. They accounted for everything from the ground shaking beneath their feet to the air moving across it, proving that their blueprints were holistic documents, considering every environmental variable. This comprehensive approach naturally extended to managing another invisible yet powerful force, the extreme swing between scorching days and frigid nights. The desert sun beats down, yet inside an ancient adobe dwelling, the air remains surprisingly cool. This simple comfort is the result of a sixth brilliant principle, the mastery of thermal mass. Early builders understood that their materials could do more than just support weight. They could actively manage the climate within. Thick walls made from sun-dried mud brick or adobe act like a giant natural battery for heat. Throughout the scorching day, these massive walls slowly absorb thermal energy, preventing the interior from overheating. Then, as the desert night grows cold, that stored warmth is gently released back into the living space, creating a stable, comfortable temperature around the clock. This was a passive system requiring no energy beyond the initial construction, a perfect symbiosis with the local environment. The principle was applied globally, tailored to each region's unique challenges. In the sprawling Roman bathhouses, engineers designed a system called the hypocaust. Hot air from a furnace was channeled through hollow spaces under the raised floors and behind the walls, effectively turning the entire structure into a massive radiator. This ingenious central heating ensured comfort in large public spaces, even during the coldest months. Conversely, in the hot, arid climates of Persia, architects designed tall, chimney-like structures known as wind catchers. These elegant towers were positioned to capture the slightest cool breeze high above the ground, funneling it downward into the heart of a building. The incoming air was often directed over pools of water or through cool, subterranean spaces, becoming even colder before circulating through living areas, a natural form of air conditioning. This deep understanding of thermal dynamics was not merely about comfort. It was also a crucial strategy for structural preservation. By moderating extreme temperature swings, these builders minimized the destructive cycle of expansion and contraction that can crack stone and weaken mortar over centuries. Their structures experienced a far gentler thermal rhythm, which dramatically extended their lifespan. They were not just building shelters, they were creating stable microclimates, designing buildings that breathed with the days and seasons. This foresight to work in concert with the sun and wind reveals a holistic blueprint, one that considered every environmental force, even those they could not see. This comprehensive approach to durability makes us wonder, what was the ultimate secret that bound all these principles together into a single, timeless vision? A tree's roots might seem like a threat to ancient stonework, yet at Angkor Wat they were a calculated part of the design. These sprawling root systems were not invaders, they were invited guardians, deliberately encouraged to weave a living net through the soil. Their purpose was to anchor the earth itself against the torrential monsoon rains, preventing catastrophic erosion from washing away the very ground supporting the temple's immense weight. This was the seventh principle, biological integration, where engineers saw the natural world not as an adversary but as the ultimate collaborator. Across the globe, this same philosophy took root. On steep slopes, grasses were planted to bind the soil with a dense mat of filaments, their tiny roots holding the land in place long after the builders had departed. In damper climates, moss was allowed to grow on stone surfaces where it acted like a gentle sponge, absorbing driving rain and slowing its destructive runoff. Some cultures cultivated specific shrubs and trees along riverbanks and embankments, their deep, tenacious roots forming living buttresses that grew stronger with each passing year, a self-repairing defense against the relentless decay caused by wind and water. This was early bioengineering, a brilliant fusion of the organic and the inorganic. These builders understood that a landscape is a living system, and by weaving life itself into their structures, they created defenses that could adapt, mature, and even regenerate. This holistic vision, where a temple and a forest become one interdependent entity, reveals a mindset that looked beyond mere construction. It was about creating a resilient, breathing landscape, a philosophy that seamlessly connects to the final, profound layer of their design, the symbolic and practical roles of celestial alignment. The stones of Stonehenge do not merely stand, they point. Their massive forms are arranged with a precision that captures the sun's journey at its most extreme moments, the summer and winter solstices. This alignment was far more than a calendar for ceremony. It was a critical tool for survival and construction. By marking these celestial turning points, ancient communities could predict the onset of harsh winters and the return of fertile seasons. This knowledge allowed them to schedule the most demanding phases of building, quarrying, and transporting stone for the short, favorable windows of temperate weather. They were not just watching the sky, they were using it to orchestrate their work in harmony with the Earth's rhythms, avoiding the destructive forces of frozen ground or torrential rains. This principle of astronomical alignment was a global strategy for risk management. In ancient Egypt, the grand temples were often oriented with their main axis pointing directly toward the Nile River. This was not a random choice. It aligned the structures with the annual flooding of the river, an event that was both a source of life-giving silt and a potential source of catastrophic destruction. By understanding the celestial cues that heralded the flood, engineers could time the laying of foundations for the period when the soil was at its most stable and workable after the waters had receded. They built their eternity not in defiance of the river's cycle, but in perfect sync with it. This cosmic scheduling extended to the very experience of the buildings themselves. Structures were frequently positioned to capture the low, warming angle of the winter sun, allowing its rays to penetrate deep into interior spaces for natural heating. Conversely, the same designs would provide cooling shade during the scorching high sun of summer. Every orientation was a deliberate calculation, optimizing the structure's interaction with solar energy across the entire year. This long-term strategy required something profound, the patient transmission of knowledge across generations. A builder would never live to see the full lifespan of the pyramid he worked on, so his understanding of celestial patterns and seasonal adaptation had to be passed down, becoming a sacred, practical inheritance. This was foresight on a civilizational scale, a testament to a culture that planned not for a decade but for 1,000 years. Their legacy challenges our modern pace, making us wonder if we have forgotten how to build with such deep, cyclical patience. A master mason would not simply hand his apprentice a set of written instructions. Instead, he would place a rough stone in the young man's hands and ask him to feel its surface, to trace the subtle, almost invisible lines running through it. This was the ninth principle, the vital transmission of hard-won knowledge across generations. In the guilds of medieval Europe, the secrets of building for eternity were passed down through a living chain of mentorship. An apprentice learned to identify the hidden fault lines in a block of limestone, the precise angle to strike it so it would split cleanly along its natural grain. He memorized the exact ratios of sand, lime, and water needed for a mortar that could expand and contract with the seasons without crumbling under the frost. This was a knowledge system built on experience, preserved not in books, but in the hands and minds of its practitioners. It was an oral and practical tradition that ensured the environmental lessons learned through catastrophic failure or brilliant success were not lost when one generation passed. This continuous loop of learning was the true bedrock of progress. While practical skills were honed on the scaffold, the theoretical foundations were also being preserved. The Roman architect Vitruvius compiled his extensive manuscripts, documenting which materials were best suited for coastal climates versus arid interiors, and how to design foundations to resist the push of floodwaters. These texts became cherished repositories of collective intelligence, studied for centuries after their author was gone. This combination of hands-on apprenticeship and scholarly record-keeping created a powerful cumulative wisdom. A builder in the 1500s could draw upon the accumulated insights of 2,000 years of prior engineering. He did not have to relearn the hard way that a certain type of sandstone dissolves in acidic rain, or that a specific foundation design fails in sandy soil. That knowledge was his inheritance, allowing him to approach even the most ambitious cathedral or fortress with a deep-seated confidence. This long-term perspective, this patient cultivation of expertise, stands in stark contrast to our modern world of rapid turnover and disposable construction. It forces us to ask a difficult question: how many of our own environmental lessons are being lost because we no longer have systems to pass them forward? The strongest walls were often the ones built twice. Encircling Constantinople, the legendary Theodosian walls presented not one, but two massive lines of defense with a deadly killing ground between them. This was not an act of paranoid overbuilding. It was a masterclass in redundancy. If a siege engine or a powerful earthquake managed to breach the formidable outer wall, the inner one stood ready, a perfect fail-safe that could still protect the city. This principle of designing for the worst-case scenario was a cornerstone of ancient engineering philosophy. They understood that no single component, no matter how well made, was infallible. So they built backups directly into their blueprints. Roman aqueducts, for instance, frequently featured secondary, smaller support arches nestled within their primary structure. These were not needed for everyday function, but if the main arch ever cracked under an immense load or a tremor, the secondary one would immediately engage, sharing the burden and preventing a catastrophic domino collapse. This same foresight was applied to corners and joints, the points of greatest stress in any building. Here, engineers would add extra stonework, clever interlocking patterns, or hidden buttresses, all designed to absorb and redistribute forces that would otherwise cause the structure to tear itself apart. Their caution extended even to water management. Dams and reservoirs were almost always built with overflow channels or spillways. These carefully calculated passages gave floodwaters a safe, predetermined route to escape, protecting the main dam structure from being overtopped and eroded away. A single point of failure was simply not an option. This meticulous, layered approach to safety reveals a mindset that seems almost alien in our modern world of optimized efficiency. For these builders, the ultimate goal was not speed or cost savings, it was permanence. They prioritized long-term survival above all else, accepting the extra labor and material as a necessary investment in a future they would never see. This profound commitment to endurance through calculated overbuilding forces us to look at the grandest surviving monuments with new eyes, searching for the hidden supports and silent backups that have allowed them to stand against time. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands today because its builders thought like the desert itself. They selected a specific type of fine, white limestone for the outer casing, a material that did more than just look majestic. Its highly reflective surface acted like a giant mirror, throwing back the brutal energy of the Sahara sun. This simple, brilliant choice regulated the internal temperature, preventing the extreme thermal expansion and contraction that would have slowly shattered the masonry from within. But the true genius began far below the surface, invisible to the eye. Before a single stone was set, engineers achieved a foundation of breathtaking precision, leveling the entire base to within a fraction of an inch across 13 acres of solid bedrock. This meticulous preparation ensured that the pyramid's immense weight, over 6 million tons, would settle evenly, preventing any one section from sinking and triggering a catastrophic collapse. Even the pyramid's internal passages were not random. They were deliberately aligned to avoid the prevailing winds, a strategic decision that prevented the relentless desert sand from accumulating and blocking these sacred corridors. The iconic shape itself is a masterclass in load distribution, channeling the colossal weight of the structure downward and outward in a stable, balanced flow, allowing it to absorb and dissipate the energy of seismic shocks. And its location on the high Giza Plateau was the final piece of the puzzle, placing it safely above the floodplain of the Nile, immune to the river's seasonal surges. The pyramid was not a single solution to a single problem. It was a symphony of foresight where material science, geometry, and geology converged into a single, indomitable form. This desert giant exemplifies a complete environmental strategy, a testament to how multiple principles of endurance could be woven together to survive for millennia in one of Earth's most challenging landscapes, a feat of holistic engineering that finds a stunning parallel in a very different part of the world. The Roman Colosseum stands as a masterclass in urban resilience, a fortress of public entertainment built to withstand the dual pressures of immense crowds and a volatile environment. Step through one of its 80 arched entrances and you are walking through a genius structural calculation. Each arch is not merely an opening, it is a meticulously engineered funnel, channeling the weight of thousands of spectators down through a network of robust vaults and piers. This radial system distributed the live load of the crowd evenly, preventing any single point from bearing a catastrophic burden. But the Colosseum's true enemy was not just the people inside, but the ground below. Rome sits in a seismically active region, and the architects knew their stone giant could not be rigid. Their brilliant solution was to build flexibility directly into the materials. The massive outer wall was constructed primarily from travertine, a local limestone exceptionally resistant to the cracking and erosion caused by the city's humid climate. Yet, for the immense internal staircases and radial walls that bore less load, they used a lighter, more porous volcanic stone called tuff, and for the vaults overhead, they employed a revolutionary concrete made from volcanic ash. This strategic mix of materials created a structure with varying densities and strengths. When an earthquake struck, these different components could shift and settle at slightly different rates, absorbing and dissipating the seismic energy rather than fighting it into a fatal fracture. Above ground, the very shape of the building was a defense. The Colosseum's iconic elliptical footprint was a masterstroke of aerodynamics. Unlike a perfect circle, the curved facade presented a continuously changing surface to the wind, breaking up its force and preventing the kind of sustained pressure that could fatigue the highest tiers of stone over centuries. Meanwhile, below the wooden arena floor lay an entire hidden world, the hypogeum. This subterranean labyrinth of tunnels and chambers was equipped with its own sophisticated drainage system. Channels were carved to catch rainwater flowing down from the vast seating area, funneling it away through lead pipes to prevent flooding that would have turned the underground into a swamp during violent storms. Every element, from the grandest arch to the smallest drain, was part of a single, integrated design for survival in a dense, demanding city. It proves that ancient foresight was not limited to remote temples or desert tombs, but was applied with equal brilliance to the beating heart of urban life, a versatility we find echoed in the most extreme landscapes on Earth. Perched at 8,200 feet, the lost city of Machu Picchu clings to a mountain ridge with a defiance that seems to defy gravity itself. Its survival through centuries of violent storms and tremors is no accident, but the result of an engineering philosophy so integrated with the mountain it becomes part of the landscape. The first challenge was the ground beneath their feet, a steep and unstable slope prone to devastating landslides. The Inca response was the agricultural terrace, an innovation we often mistake for simple farmland. Each terrace was a complex, multi-layered construction. The visible stone retaining wall was just the beginning. Behind it, builders laid a deep foundation of coarse gravel, then a layer of sand, and finally a rich topsoil. This was not just a planter box, it was a massive, subterranean drainage system. When the torrential Andean rains fell, water would seep through the soil, hit the sand layer, and flow rapidly down through the gravel, exiting through strategically placed stone channels long before it could saturate the earth and trigger a collapse. These terraces transformed dangerously angled slopes into stable, productive land, simultaneously feeding the population and anchoring the entire mountainside. This mastery over water was matched by a brilliant understanding of the Earth's movement. Look closely at any structure in the citadel, from the Temple of the Sun to the humblest storehouse. The stones are polygonal masterpieces, each one a unique shape with multiple interlocking sides, fitted together without a single drop of mortar. This was not a primitive technique. It was an advanced form of seismic engineering. When an earthquake rattles the ridge, a rigid, mortared wall would crack and crumble. But these loose-fitting stones dance, they shift and grind against one another, dissipating the tremor's energy as friction. When the shaking stops, the stones simply settle back into their perfectly carved niches. The entire city was built to flex, to move with the mountain rather than against it. This flexible skeleton was bolted directly to the planet's bones. Engineers meticulously carved the foundations of major buildings directly into the living bedrock of the mountain, creating a permanent, unshakable bond that prevented shifting or sliding. They even studied the natural flow of the land, aligning their walls with the ridges and contours of the terrain to divert potential avalanche paths and mudflows around the city, not through it. Every stone was local granite, a material already tempered by the high altitude's brutal freeze-thaw cycles, resisting the cracks that would shatter a weaker rock. And the city itself was oriented like a living organism, its open plazas and building windows positioned to capture the low-angled sun for warmth, while its compact layout and strategic wall placements provided shelter from the punishing winds that whip across the peaks. Machu Picchu is not a city placed upon a mountain. It is a city grown from it, a testament to how human ingenuity can achieve eternity by first learning to listen to the land. This same intimate dialogue between builder and environment takes a dramatic turn where the mountains meet the sea, in coastal fortifications that had to withstand a different kind of endless siege. Stretching across thousands of miles, the Great Wall of China faced a greater enemy than any army, the relentless and varied moods of nature itself. Its builders could not rely on a single design, for a solution that worked in the humid eastern forests would crumble in the western desert sands. Their genius lay in a localized strategy, tailoring the wall's very substance to the specific threats of each region. In the damp, mountainous east, watchtowers were strategically positioned on high ground, their foundations carefully placed above historical flood zones and potential landslide paths. The bricks for these sections were not simply sun-dried clay. They were kiln-fired at intense temperatures, creating a hardened, ceramic-like surface that could resist the penetrating moisture of humid summers, and just as crucially, the destructive expansion of water freezing within its pores during brutal winters. This attention to moisture was systemic. Cleverly angled drainage outlets were built directly into the wall's structure, giving rainwater a clear escape route that prevented pooling and erosion at the vulnerable base. But as the wall snaked westward into arid deserts, the engineering challenges transformed. Here, the fine, abrasive sand carried on the wind could bury lower structures and scour surfaces like countless tiny chisels. Builders responded by adapting the wall's profile and materials, creating smoother, more compact surfaces that offered less purchase for the drifting dunes. In the rugged, unstable mountains, the threat shifted to rockfalls and seismic tremors. Here, segments were reinforced with deeper foundations and more robust stonework, their shapes designed to deflect tumbling boulders and absorb the energy of shifting ground. The material choice was always a direct response to local resources and climate. In some regions, they used a technique called rammed earth, tamping local soil mixed with gravel into incredibly dense, durable layers. In others, they quarried stone, knowing its mass and stability were needed for that particular slope or valley. This was not a monolithic barrier, it was a chameleon, changing its form and composition to collaborate with the landscape it traversed. The wall's ultimate purpose was martial, yet its enduring legacy is a testament to a different kind of defense, a victory over environmental decay. It proves that true endurance is not achieved through a single, rigid master plan, but through a deeply observant and adaptive philosophy, one that listens to the whispers of the local earth and sky. This principle of hyper-local adaptation raises a profound question for our own time. Can we rediscover that ancient art of listening to a place, of designing with its unique voice in mind, to build a future that is as resilient as it is respectful? The first stone wall to collapse in a winter storm was not just a failure, it was a question. Why did it fall when its neighbor stood firm? Early engineering was a relentless conversation with disaster, a slow, patient accumulation of answers written in stone and timber. There were no textbooks, only trial and error. A builder would mix a new mortar, only to watch it turn to dust after a single season of frost. He would then adjust the recipe, perhaps adding more lime, or discovering that a specific type of sand created a stronger bond. His successor would build upon that small victory, and his successor after that, until after generations, a formula emerged that could defy the elements for centuries. This was the true origin of materials like Roman concrete. Someone, somewhere, observed that a mortar mixed with the volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius did not just set. It grew harder and more resilient when exposed to seawater, a property that would have been impossible to predict through theory alone. It was a discovery born from repeated, observant experimentation. The process was painfully slow, but it was thorough. Every collapsed aqueduct taught a lesson about lateral thrust, informing the design of stronger, self-bracing arches. Every temple that crumbled in an earthquake revealed which foundation designs were fatally rigid and which allowed for life-saving movement. These were not seen as mere setbacks, but as the most valuable kind of instruction. Each failure was a data point that refined the collective understanding of how to build for permanence. This empirical method created a living library of proven solutions, a repository of hard-won wisdom that could be passed down and adapted. A community that learned from its structural losses did not make the same mistake twice. They built back smarter with deeper foundations, more flexible joints, and more durable materials. Resilience was not a gift of genius, but a reward for perseverance, for the courage to observe, to fail, and to learn from the land itself. This slow, cumulative progress forged a legacy of endurance, challenging our modern pursuit of instant, disposable solutions. How many of our own building mistakes are we doomed to repeat because we no longer take the time to truly learn from what falls down? A Mayan temple rising from the jungle canopy was far more than a place of ceremony. Its towering form was precisely oriented to cast a shadow that aligned with the sun's position only on the equinox, marking the arrival of vital seasonal rains. This celestial alignment was a sacred act, a way of synchronizing human life with the rhythms of the gods. Yet this spiritual imperative served a deeply practical need. By knowing exactly when the rains would begin, the entire community could coordinate the planting of their crops, ensuring survival for the year ahead. The temple was both an observatory and an agricultural calendar carved in stone, proving that the line between the sacred and the practical was often invisible. This integration of belief and function shaped the very form of ancient structures. Many cultures designed their cities and temples with circular or radial layouts, believing these forms represented cosmic harmony and the cyclical nature of life. But this symbolic choice yielded a brilliant engineering benefit. A circular wall, for instance, has no weak corners for the wind to catch and batter. It presents a continuous, curved surface that forces gusts to flow smoothly around it, significantly reducing structural stress. The shape, revered for its spiritual meaning, also happened to be one of the most aerodynamically stable forms possible. The mandate for permanence, driven by a desire to honor deities or ancestors, directly influenced the materials and methods chosen. A ziggurat meant to be a stairway to heaven for eternity could not be built with perishable wood. Religious texts and oral traditions often specified the use of the most durable stones, the deepest foundations, and the most erosion-resistant sealants available. This spiritual requirement for immortality pushed engineers to seek out and perfect the most resilient technologies of their age. The communities that built these monuments did so as an act of faith, a project that spanned generations. A father would teach his son the precise method for mixing a waterproof mortar, not just as a trade skill, but as a sacred duty to maintain the temple's connection to the divine. This cultural imperative for upkeep meant that cracks were repaired before they could widen, drains were cleared before they could clog, and foundations were reinforced at the first sign of settlement. The structure's resilience was woven into the cultural identity itself, ensuring its survival long after the original architects were gone. The enduring legacy of these places stems from this powerful fusion, where spiritual belief provided the unwavering motivation to build for forever, and practical intelligence provided the means. A Persian wind catcher rising above a clay roof was not merely a local invention, it was a piece of wisdom waiting for a traveler. Along the sprawling Silk Road, caravans carried more than silk and spices, they transported entire philosophies of design. When a merchant from the deserts of Persia described the tower that could catch a breeze and channel cool air into a home, an architect in a bustling Central Asian city listened intently. He then adapted the core principle, perhaps building his own version with local bricks, tailored to the unique wind patterns of his own valley. This was the silent, powerful cargo of these ancient routes, the exchange of solutions. a technique for building flexible, earthquake-resistant wooden joints, perfected over centuries in the mountainous regions of East Asia, could slowly make its way westward after trade contacts were established. A community that had never experienced a severe tremor might learn from travelers about a design that allowed buildings to sway, and they would file that knowledge away, a priceless insurance policy for an uncertain future. Perhaps the most transformative idea to travel these routes was the arch. Its principles were understood in Mesopotamia, but it was the Romans who studied, refined, and deployed it on an imperial scale. They saw its potential for distributing heavy loads across vast distances, and they used it to build aqueducts that could span valleys in Gaul and bridges that could withstand the freeze-thaw cycles of northern climates. This was not simple copying, it was creative adaptation. The core geometric truth of the arch remained, but its execution was perfected to meet new environmental challenges. This global network of shared intelligence accelerated innovation at a pace that would have been impossible for any isolated culture. It proved that the resilience of the ancient world was built on two pillars: a deep, intimate knowledge of the local landscape and a willingness to learn from the genius of distant strangers. The enduring monuments we admire today often stand on a foundation of both local stone and global thought. The true magic of ancient monuments lies not just in their grand shapes, but in the very glue that holds them together. A Roman engineer working on the harbor at Caesarea would create a seemingly miraculous substance, mixing slaked lime with a specific type of volcanic ash and chunks of rubble. When this slurry was poured into wooden forms directly into the sea, it did not dissolve. Instead, a chemical reaction began, and the mixture hardened into a solid mass even stronger and more durable in the corrosive saltwater than it was on land. This was Roman concrete, a material so revolutionary it allowed entire harbors to defy the relentless, erosive power of waves for centuries. This was not a single, secret recipe, but a whole science of composite materials, each tailored to a specific environmental threat. On the other side of the world, Chinese builders achieved a different kind of resilience. They discovered that by mixing standard lime mortar with a soup made from sticky rice, they created a bond with a remarkable property: flexibility. In regions plagued by earthquakes, this sticky rice mortar allowed walls to sway and settle without shattering, the organic compounds from the rice providing a subtle give that pure mineral mortar lacked. These early material scientists were relentless experimenters. They learned that by adding horsehair or plant fibers to their plasters and mortars, they could dramatically increase tensile strength, creating a matrix that resisted cracking under stress. These fibrous additives also helped manage moisture, wicking water away from vulnerable surfaces and preventing the freeze-thaw cycle that could turn solid stonework into rubble. Every batch was a refinement, the result of centuries of patient observation and adjustment. A failed mix that crumbled in the first frost was a lesson. A successful one that held firm for a generation became part of the oral tradition, a piece of chemical ingenuity passed from master to apprentice. They were transforming simple, earthly elements into durable bonds, creating the resilient skeletons that allowed their most ambitious architectural dreams to stand the test of time. The silent arteries of ancient cities were not made of stone but of water. In the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, engineers faced a paradox: how to bring life-giving water to their fields without letting it destroy the very land it nourished. Their solution was a network of canals so precisely engineered that their principles are still used today. They dug these channels with a deliberately slight, almost imperceptible gradient. This gentle slope was a masterstroke of calculation, fast enough to keep the water moving and prevent stagnant pools, yet slow enough that its current would not scour and erode the vulnerable earthen banks. It was a perfect balance between flow and stability, but they knew that water was unpredictable, and a single violent storm could overwhelm their careful design. So they integrated spillways directly into the system, designated channels that would activate only during a flood. These spillways gave the excess water a predetermined escape route, a safe path to divert the surge away from the city walls and croplands, preventing catastrophic breaches. This was not crisis management, it was crisis anticipation engineered directly into the landscape. This same foresight reached its zenith in the Persian Khanate. In arid regions where surface water was scarce, these builders tapped hidden reservoirs deep underground. They dug a gently sloping tunnel from the water source far back into the foothills, allowing gravity to do the work of bringing a steady, reliable stream to the surface. But the true genius of the Khanate was what it prevented. By drawing water from a wide underground area through a slow, controlled flow, it avoided the sudden, violent drop in water pressure that causes the ground above to compact and collapse, a phenomenon we now call land subsidence. The Khanate was a sustainable technology that harvested water without sacrificing the stability of the land itself. Meanwhile, the Romans were mastering water on a monumental scale. The Pont du Gard aqueduct in France is a breathtaking example, a three-tiered arcade of stone that carried fresh water across a deep river valley. Its entire operation relied on a constant, unwavering gravitational pull. The engineers calculated the descent so meticulously that the water flowed for miles at a perfect pace, and before that water ever entered the city, it passed through sedimentation tanks. In these quiet, still pools, sand, silt, and debris would gently settle to the bottom, filtered out by gravity alone. This prevented the aqueduct's channels from clogging and protected the delicate lead and ceramic pipes within the city from abrasive damage. This mastery of hydrology was a form of structural insurance. By managing water's power, its flow, and its purity, these ancient engineers prevented the slow, insidious damage that could undermine foundations, erode supports, and turn solid ground to mud. They ensured their settlements did not just exist near water, but thrived in a lasting, harmonious partnership with it. A city's true strength lies in the wisdom of its layout. Those gridded streets of Mohenjo-daro reveal a master plan where every neighborhood had a purpose dictated by the environment. The city's most vital structures, its elevated citadels and granaries, were deliberately placed on high ground, far from the reach of seasonal floodwaters that would swamp the river plains. This was not a random arrangement of buildings, but a conscious zoning of the entire settlement based on an intimate knowledge of local hazards. Residential quarters, nestled safely within this protective framework, were designed with internal courtyards and clever air wells. These open spaces acted as natural lungs for the city, pulling cool air down into the homes and pushing hot air out, creating a continuous, passive ventilation system that offered relief from the oppressive heat. This was urban planning as a form of collective security. The entire community was organized to minimize risk from the moment someone laid a foundation. Beyond single cities, this philosophy manifested in the strategic use of green belts. Planners would leave wide swaths of undeveloped land between dense urban areas and surrounding forests. These open spaces served as crucial fire breaks, halting the advance of wildfires that could leap from the wilderness into tightly packed neighborhoods. They also acted as powerful wind buffers, their trees and vegetation absorbing the energy of dust storms and harsh gusts before they could slam into the city's outer walls. Even the public squares were multifunctional tools for resilience. Their expansive, unpaved surfaces were not merely for gathering, they were giant, permeable sponges. During a sudden downpour, these open plazas could absorb vast quantities of stormwater, preventing the city's intricate drainage channels from being overwhelmed and the streets from turning into raging torrents. Every aspect of the city's orientation was a calculated decision. Major roads were aligned to capture the low, warming angle of the winter sun, allowing its rays to penetrate deep into the urban canyons and naturally heat the stone and brick, while in the summer, the same alignment provided cooling shade during the hottest part of the day. This was foresight on a grand scale, a recognition that a city's survival depended on weaving environmental intelligence into its very street map. By designing for the safety of the whole community, these ancient planners built a legacy of resilience that no single structure, no matter how strong, could ever achieve alone. That ancient wisdom of dancing with the earth is not lost. It has simply been reborn in steel and glass. Modern engineers, facing the same fundamental challenges, have arrived at solutions that echo the past with stunning clarity. The same principle that allowed a Japanese pagoda to sway with a tremor is now engineered into the very foundations of our tallest skyscrapers. Today, we call it base isolation, a system where a building rests on massive rubber and lead bearings that absorb the violent horizontal energy of an earthquake, allowing the structure above to remain nearly still. This is the direct, high-tech descendant of the pagoda's loose joints and the Inca's interlocking stonework, a rediscovery of the profound truth that flexibility conquers brute force. Our pursuit of sustainability has led us back to other ancient pillars, like local material sourcing. Contemporary green building standards champion the use of regional stone, timber, and rammed earth, recognizing that materials acclimated to a local environment perform better and drastically reduce the energy consumed in transportation. We are relearning the Roman lesson of using what the land provides. Furthermore, the passive climate control of ancient adobe dwellings and Persian wind catchers is now a central tenet of modern architectural design. Strategic window placement, thermal mass walls, and natural ventilation systems are all sophisticated iterations of that original goal, to create comfortable interiors with minimal mechanical intervention, working in concert with the sun and wind rather than fighting them. Even the intuitive aerodynamic shapes of Gothic spires have been refined through computational fluid dynamics. Software now models the flow of wind around a proposed tower, allowing architects to subtly sculpt its form to minimize sway and reduce structural fatigue, achieving with calculation what medieval masons achieved through generations of observation. This is not mere coincidence. It is the legacy of a long-term perspective. The modern emphasis on a building's entire life cycle, its durability, and its low environmental impact over a century or more, is a direct inheritance from the early builders who planned for millennia. In an era of climate change and finite resources, their environmental wisdom is no longer a historical curiosity. It is a vital guide, reminding us that the most resilient future is one built on the deepest foundations of the past. Some of the most persistent stories surrounding ancient wonders are also the most misleading. A common myth suggests that structures like the pyramids were built by vast armies of forced labor, yet archaeological evidence paints a very different picture. Excavations at Giza reveal workers' tombs and settlements that indicate these were skilled, well-fed artisans who took great pride in their craft. These were not slaves, but respected specialists who understood the complex geometry and material science required to make a building last. Similarly, the idea that these feats were too advanced for humans and required otherworldly intervention completely dismisses the generations of accumulated knowledge and empirical problem-solving that these cultures possessed. They did not need alien technology. They had something far more powerful, a deep, patient understanding of their own world, honed through centuries of trial and error. Another misconception is that these monuments were somehow magically immune to the passage of time. The truth is they were not. Many structures did suffer partial collapses, and their surfaces were constantly weathered by wind and rain. Their brilliance lay not in being impervious, but in being designed for maintenance. The very same stone joints that allowed Inca walls to flex in an earthquake also made individual blocks easy to remove and replace when damaged. A cracked lintel in a Greek temple could be swapped out without compromising the entire structure. This foresight for future repairs was built directly into the original blueprint, ensuring that the community could care for its legacy across generations. These were not mythical, supernatural creations. They were the result of human ingenuity, of careful observation, and a relentless drive to solve real-world problems. By setting aside these fictions, we can finally appreciate the true marvel, the profound and very real intelligence of the people who looked at a mountain, a river, or a desert and envisioned an eternity. This ancient wisdom holds profound lessons for our own era of climate uncertainty. The principle of local material sourcing, so vital to the pyramids and Roman aqueducts, directly confronts the immense carbon footprint of modern construction. Shipping steel and concrete across continents consumes staggering amounts of energy, yet by returning to regional stone, timber, and even advanced forms of rammed earth, we can build structures that are inherently suited to their environment. A building made from local sandstone in a desert climate already understands how to handle the scorching days and cold nights, just as it did 2,000 years ago. This is not a step backward, but a leap forward into a more sustainable and resilient way of building. We can also rediscover the power of passive systems. The thermal mass of ancient adobe, which naturally regulated indoor temperatures, is a blueprint for reducing our reliance on energy-intensive heating and cooling. Modern green architecture is now embracing this, designing buildings with strategically placed windows for solar gain in winter and deep overhangs for shade in summer, letting the sun and wind do the work that fossil fuels once did. This is the same intelligence that guided the builders of Machu Picchu and Persian wind catchers, applied with contemporary materials and precision. Perhaps the most urgent lesson lies in the ancient commitment to redundancy. Our modern infrastructure is often a network of single points of failure, where one breached levee or one collapsed bridge can paralyze an entire region. The early engineers, with their double walls and secondary arches, understood that true safety comes from having a backup plan engineered directly into the design. Applying this foresight today could mean designing power grids with multiple, decentralized renewable sources, so the failure of one does not plunge a city into darkness, or constructing coastal defenses with secondary barriers and overflow channels to manage storm surges. By studying how these early societies planned not for decades, but for centuries of environmental stability, we can adopt a similarly long-term perspective. Our cities must be envisioned as dynamic ecosystems, capable of adapting to the increasing volatility of a changing planet. This is not merely an architectural challenge, it is a fundamental shift in mindset, one that prioritizes the security and well-being of future generations over short-term convenience. The legacy of the ancients is a powerful reminder that resilience is not about conquering nature, but about learning to collaborate with it once again. From the pyramids to the pagodas, this journey reveals a profound truth about human ingenuity. The story of how early engineers designed for environmental change is not a chronicle of lost secrets, but a powerful reminder of our innate creativity and foresight. We have walked through the principles that granted these wonders their immortality, from the profound wisdom of selecting local materials already tempered by their surroundings, to the self-bracing geometries that turned rigid stone into a flexible, dynamic form. We saw how they managed the paradox of water, guiding its flow instead of fighting its power, and how they designed foundations to dance with a trembling earth. They mastered the invisible forces of wind and sun, creating comfortable climates with nothing but stone and shape. They integrated the living world, seeing trees and grasses as collaborators in their quest for permanence. And they planned with a perspective that spanned generations, patiently passing down hard-won knowledge. These are not archaic tricks, they are timeless lessons in resilience. Their legacy is an invitation to look at the built world around us with new eyes, to recognize the deep, enduring wisdom embedded in ancient stones. It challenges us to consider our own footprint on the planet. So we would love to hear from you. Which historical structure leaves you most in awe of its enduring strength? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed unraveling these mysteries with us, subscribe to continue the journey into our past. Because understanding how they built for eternity truly helps us build a better, more resilient future for everyone.